Hey everyone, Mark DeJesus here. Welcome to this broadcast. Today, I want to talk about the subject of empathy. And why is it that people struggle to give you the empathy that you need? Why are we pathetic at being empathetic? Something we're going to dive into today. I'm going to give you the top 12 reasons that people do not empathize with you. Some of it, I pray, will be a blessing to your life and your journey, kind of help you get some perspective, because empathy is a very, very powerful experience. It's the ability to connect with what someone else is feeling in basic terminology. It's the ability to emotionally connect with someone's struggle, with their journey, with what they're feeling. It's a deep need that we all have. It's something that allows us to feel connected, safe, validated, and understood. Boy, do we have a need to be understood, right? And I find when people are looking for help, if they can feel safe, loved, and understood in their journey, even just a little bit, that can have a dramatic healing impact. A lot of times we're looking for the helpful fix, but when we feel an emotional, loving environment, it can do so much even when the quote-unquote fix isn't even brought up or addressed. It reveals how much our hearts need love and how much our hearts need the safety of experiencing that empathy. At the end of this, I'm going to get into an email that was sent in. I'll break it down a little bit, but first let me get into the 12 reasons, the top 12. We're going to start from number 12 and work our way down to number 1. The top 12, if I can say the word 12 reasons people do not empathize with you. I'm going to be honest with you. Number 12 is they are numbed out. Our world is numbed out by too much emotional stimulus. We have things hitting our senses all day long. It's tapping away at our emotions. Quite honestly, we have too many things presented to us all around the world that we are supposed to care about deeply. So I want to say this: you are not designed to carry a deep emotional response to everything out there that asks you to have a deep emotional response. God has really called you to love your family. That is where your greatest emotional investment needs to be. In marriage, in your parenting, in your circle of friends and relationships. Then out of that flows your influence to your neighbor, to love your neighbor as yourself, to live in that kind of dynamic. We get focused on and lost in all these world causes and these world events and this thing happening, and we feel we're supposed to feel that. It's not necessarily true. You're not designed to feel everything in every place. It creates an emotional fatigue. We're constantly getting charged in areas, and it's not helpful for our emotions. So I think it's helpful to understand up front, we are living in a emotionally fatigued, worn out, heavy kind of existence, and we're not knowing how to activate those emotional resources for where it's most meaningful. And it's like people don't have the energy for each other as they should. Number 11 is they do not know how to practice compassion over their own journey. So therefore, they don't have much to give to you. We often give out of how we see ourselves. And if we're practicing compassion towards ourselves, practicing loving ourselves the way that God loves us, seeing ourselves through a gracious lens, if we're not living in that, then we're not going to be as compassionate towards others. You can immediately see when someone doesn't practice self-aware work in their heart and working through their own issues by the way that they respond, in a way that's not empathetic, in a way that is not compassionate, in a way that is really unsafe. And I'll get to that more in just a minute. Number 10 on the list. This is just honest awareness of the times we live in. They don't have time. Everyone is so busy. We wear it as a badge. We wear it as a badge of honor. We think the busier we are, the better life is. We are living in a chronic busy world that for many people, just slowing down their busyness is excruciating. And because they're moving so fast, no one has time. Because being empathetic requires that you slow down and have space. You're not in a hurry. You're not moving to the next thing. And we live in a world where we're just constantly moving, and no one has time to sit down and just work through and talk through, because that takes investment. That takes energy. And we're already, as I said, numbed out by all the stimulus. People are not working on their own issues. So therefore, when you're trying to talk through things, they're distracted. They're in a buzz. So they're just wanting to kind of move through your pain rather quickly and move on to the next thing because of our time, because of how we're practicing our time. That's why one of the first things I encourage people, if they want to experience more mental, emotional, relationship health, they're going to have to slow down. They're going to have to bring the RPMs down to begin to even be aware of what is needing attention. Number nine in the top 12 reasons people do not empathize with you. They can't relate. They can't relate. Now, some of this is because they can't relate because they're not working on their own journey and they're not working on their own stuff. So therefore, they don't have much to offer you. But many times what we do, and I pray I can communicate this the way that I see it. Many times what happens is because they can't relate, it creates an obstacle for them to go any further. So they often don't say anything, or they say stuff and it gets really awkward and weird. For example, you may be going through a season of a certain mental health battle or a certain struggle or an illness. And because they don't have that specific area in their life, it causes them to kind of just stare rather than learning. They say, well, I don't know. I can't relate. So I don't know what to say. It's not about finding the thing to say. It can be more about just listening and just taking in and just seeking to understand. I think many times we jump too quickly to our personal references. Someone would say, hey, I'm going through cancer treatment. Oh yeah, my friend has cancer. We mean well, right? We mean well because we're looking for references. And I'm not saying that's all bad, but I'm saying we need to be, if you're going to operate in empathy, seek to listen. You know, the Bible talks about be quick to listen, slow to speak. So if you're speaking, let it be words that invite compassion, that show a safety, that you're interested, that you care, that they mean something to you, where you can be compassionately curious, right? Not interrogating, not judgmental, but honor and respecting what they've been through. I think one of the things I seek to manifest relationally, or even people that I'm actively helping, is to have a great deal of respect and honor for what they've been through, because that can be that can create a lot of safety and meaning for people's life and for their journey. So instead of just listening and learning, they go, well, I can't relate. So a lot of times they don't say anything, or it gets really uncomfortable because they say something quick and it leads me to number 8. They're just not good listeners. They jump quickly to talking about themselves. They may even ask you, how are you doing? And you go, this week's been a little bit challenging. I know, because last week I was going through this. I was like, why'd you even ask? You're not listening to what I'm saying. And this is a chronic problem and shows the neediness everyone has to express what they're going through, to express the thing that they're processing through. And they're quick to jump into your perspective and give you something that they think you need to hear, which leads me to number 7 is the reason of the top 12 reasons people do not empathize with you. They think that giving you advice is the most important thing. So as you're talking, they're thinking of advice that they should give you. They think that's what they need to come up with. And they may go, I don't relate, so maybe I should give them advice. Maybe you should read this book. Maybe you should go over to this thing. Maybe you should join a group, or maybe you should blah, 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 blah. They think that you need to get advice. So Christians can become notorious for becoming obsessive advice givers. And then we, jump to like cliches, or give it to the Lord, or give it to God, or give it to him, lay it at the altar. And all these things that are really just saying I'm going to translate it for you. All that, give it to God, why don't you pray more? Why don't you do this? I don't really have time for you. I don't know what to say. And I got to just move on to the next thing because my own life is full of a lot of drama. And so I'll just give you some Christian cliches and just help you on your way. And so that's what we often bump into. Number 6 is compassion fatigue. Now, I talked about a genuine emotional fatigue that people are under, but I want to talk about those who are good empathizers. Is that even a word? They know how to practice empathy, but they're worn out because they're carrying the extra burden of where everyone else is not being empathetic. Let's just talk about counselors, for example. Counselors carry an extra burden of empathy on a constant daily basis, and many times what they're doing is empathizing with people who've not, in their family, in their relationships, had healthy experiences of receiving healthy empathy. So we live in seas of people who don't know how to empathize. So those who do can often get the extra weight, the extra burden, and they bump into compassion fatigue. So you may interact with someone like this, and you're catching them in a major burnout mode because they're carrying, and they got to work through their own stuff of letting that go, letting that stuff go through their system. They've got to learn how to release the burdens. They've got to learn I've had to go through this on a number of countless stages of my life and journey. Learning how to take the deep emotional things that I connect with people on a daily basis and cultivating that space to let those emotions work their way through my system so they don't get stuck in me and carry extra burdens in my life that I don't need to be carrying. So number 5, and this one is actually for self-awareness. I'm going to explain myself in this. The 5th reason people don't empathize with you is because you're repeating yourself. You're telling things and you're sharing things, and you get that nod, and they kind of go, yeah, I remember you telling me that. And what happens is over time, and this is not a judgmental thing. This is me walking with you, and it's okay. You do this, I do this, okay? I'm telling you, I do this, I've done this, where I have a struggle or an area, and I just keep repeating myself. Now, if you pick up on this, this is a good sign. This is not a condemning thing. This is a good sign because you realize, okay, there's a couple of things that are in play here. When we keep repeating ourselves over the same story, it's often unhealed trauma. We're just in flashbacks. We're in constant flashbacks. We're processing it out. And what we often do is we process, we're not processing actually. We're expressing it, and we have a story attached to it. Right? And so we share what happened, or we share what we're going through with the story attached to it. I can never catch a break, or this always happens to me. I can't seem to, right? And so we cycle in that over and over again. And in our relationships around us, our spouses, our loved ones, they can get wearied by the constant repetition of maybe just constant negativity from you, or just unhealed trauma. These are areas in your life that need healthy attention so you can process through it and begin to start taking some steps moving forward. It also is a part of what I call the rejection mindset, because when we haven't been validated in our lives in a chronic way, rejection comes in, and you can share your story over and over again, and people can empathize with you, but it never really heals it, because rejection is like an all-you-can-eat buffet that never gets satisfied. It's just constantly looking and pulling and needing nutrients, but it never gets it. So I'm saying this for all of our help, because there's times in my journey where I've shared what I was going through, and I picked up on the relational cue of someone else saying, yeah, I remember you sharing this with me a couple times. They weren't being rude, but it's a hint. Hey, you keep repeating this. And I remember a few times going, oh my, I've got a story over this. I need to be willing to shift my story because my story is keeping me trapped. It's keeping me trapped in a loop. I can never catch a break. This thing always happens. I don't know what I'm going to do. And it invites victim thinking, invites self-pity, because we often carry our history with a story attached to it. And so the Bible talks about the statement, whose report will you believe, right? And so I want to believe the report of the Lord, but I have to gain divine insight of faith, hope, and love in my life. I've got to be able to see through God's loving compassion and his mercy and his grace to awaken what's available to me. But I find I can often get locked in that story. So when you find you're repeating yourself and then you get more angry and more angry because people are not validating you, this can be the presence of a rejection mindset. And I've done a lot of work on this subject and a lot of material on it because rejection attacks the places where you've not been loved, validated, affirmed in your identity, to know who you are, to know you're safe. It creates performance-driven environment, spiritual slavery, and it really messes up how we do relationships. When you have a rejection mindset, it distorts how you interact with people. So it's a welcome invitation to get some healing in that area. And this next one kind of ties in a little bit more. We're going to go to number 4. And number 4 is you may be expecting something they cannot give. This often happens in reference to family members. We often expect things from a family member and they just don't have it. Mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, cousin, whatever. We expect something from them. They just can't give it. And we go rounds and rounds and rounds and we get frustrated. Sometimes in our expectation, we come in with heavy expectation. I notice this a lot in pastoring, that people come to me with heavy expectation. I got to be the superhero pastor, and I need to be what everyone else hasn't been. And it's like, whoa, can we chill out a bit here? I'm not the savior, and I'm not the superhero here. There's only one. He died and resurrected, and I'm just a vessel, right? We create this weight of expectation on other people. So here's a statement that I want to give some pause and selah to. The people that you look for empathy, they also may not empathize with you in the way that you want it, right? So they may sit there and listen, but maybe you want a hug, or maybe they do sit with you, and maybe you want them to give you advice. Come on and fix me, and this is why understanding a rejection root is important, because people could empathize with you, but then it's never enough. It's never enough. And when you find yourself kind of in that where nothing seems to satisfy, that can be a rejection root in play, because healing, that's important, because then it gets us in a better flow where we learn to go to God and connect to him in better ways. And then in relationship, we chill out with our expectations and not have these intense expectations over people that then get us angry and get us resentful. And then we're spinning out and having 100 conversations about it. And it just inflames drama around us. Look at your expectation and what you're expecting, and maybe the specific way you're wanting them to respond to you. Number 3, we're getting down in the countdown. They are just simply not comfortable with emotions. And many of you have been raised by parents who are not comfortable with emotions. They have not developed their own emotional muscles. So when you share, they just get goofy. They get weird. They don't connect with you. They just stare at you. They don't know what to say. They don't have their own self-awareness. They don't have a value for emotions in their life in learning. And I think this blocks so many people. And they just go, well, I don't have a lot of emotional references. So they just leave it at that. They don't try to learn. They don't try to grow in it. And sadly, this makes too many people, number 2, relationally unsafe. Number 2 reason why people do not empathize with you, they're just relationally unsafe in their own world. When you share with someone, and I did a video that a lot of people watched that was on signs of relationally unsafe people. You type that out. You can check it out. Mark DeJesus, signs of relationally unsafe people. And a lot of people responded to that and related to it. But here's what I want to share with you. When you seek to share with someone, and you're like, maybe we can connect here, I just want to share, and you realize this person's unsafe, their response is not, this wasn't a good idea, celebrate the idea that you tried, because sharing is a step of vulnerability, and you're never going to know everything's perfectly safe when you try. You feel the waters out, right? And then you take a step. I think it's good to kind of like get a sense, is this safe, and then give it a try. And many times I've done that, taken a leap and like, oh my goodness. And then I beat myself up after. And so don't beat yourself up. You took a step and you tried, and then use it as learning. Okay, this environment is not safe. Sharing with that person's probably not the best in safety. In Christian circles, there's a lot of legalism, a lot of condemnation, a lot of judgmentalism, a lot of shame that goes around. And so when you pick up on that, it can be a sign this person is just not relationally safe. So this isn't the best place for me to share. They don't need to be my enemy. We don't have to have any beef, but it just reveals to me that area and that arena is not the best place for me to share. And the last one, the number one reason, are you ready? The number one reason why people do not empathize with you in a way that is fruitful and meaningful is because they're just mainly thinking about themselves. I would say the majority of hurt and pain that you have in your life from relationships is actually not coming out of people thinking about you in a mean way. It's coming out of them thinking about themselves. Broken people that do not have emotional language get stuck in a life of themselves. Their own neglect and their own issues get them stuck in being very self-absorbed. And a lot of times when you walk into a room, you think, oh, what do they think about me? What are they saying about me? They're not. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves and what everyone else is thinking about them as they're walking past you and interacting with you. And there is a lot of relationship damage that takes place out of someone being incredibly self-focused. And that's why I talk about loving relationship as a flow. Letting God, learning how to receive God's love and loving him as a response to receiving his love. Seeing yourself through that love. Letting that lens impact your life and letting it flow through you so you love your neighbor as yourself in a fruitful way. And the flow of God's love operates in your life in meaningful ways that are healing and helpful. And where things get stuck is when we become obsessed about ourselves. And you and I can learn from this, because when we get stuck on ourselves, we're not relationally aware. Makes us less available to what others are going through. So there's your top 12. What I'd like to do is add into this a email that came in about this subject, and it caused me to link my talk today on this and share this. And it has to do with empathizing. I'd like to walk through it, share it with you, and then give some feedback on this. So here's the question. When I share past painful experiences, most Christians, and this word's put in quotes, Christians, even those in severe abuse support groups I'm currently in, respond deadpan. Not emotional or empathetic. Instead of asking open-ended questions. Have some of you experienced this? And do you feel hurt and angry too? I would say many of my listeners, watchers, viewers, those in the tribe, they'd say yes, experience this too. You could even look up the concept, because that deadpan, that like, There's a lot of reasons for that. In fact, there's a fascinating little trail you could go on called still face. Go in your search engine or YouTube or whatever and type in still face, and you'll see a little simple experiment they did with a mom and a baby, where when the mom's engaged and using her facial expressions, engaging the baby, gets so happy, right? And then they have her turn her face, kind of reset, and then she looks in and just stares at the baby with no response. Eventually, the baby starts screaming and just like, what is going on here? What it does. For many of us, we've had that still face experience, the neglect of not being acknowledged, understood. There's a lot we say with our eyes, right? There's a lot we can empathize with our eyes, our mouth, right? Of being able to empathize with someone. Our face is a big part of it. Our posture. It brings about either a sense of empathy or a lack of empathy, right? It's been very, very challenging even over the past couple of years because, people have had to, in many situations, wear masks. And it's blocked us from seeing this area of our face, which is a very, very important emotional, connected kind of place where you relate, you feel, you can, even everyday interactions. It's such an important such an important thing. Sometimes we don't think of these things in society because this sterilizes our interactions. So it's just something to understand as you're walking through this. Now, you're in a support group. You said several abuse support groups. And so you have to recognize, because context is important. When you're in an abuse support group, many people in that, their emotions have been tapped out. Many of them are just barely getting by. Many of them are just numbed out because of the abuse they experience has tapped out their fight or flight system. They are emotionally exhausted. So you have to give people grace in the sense of they're not showing up in the best place. They're actually showing up to try to gain empathy themselves. So you have to realize there's a whole group of people that you're in. And it's great because it reminds you you're not alone. It reminds you others are going through the same thing. Hopefully the leader can facilitate some sense of connection. But I think a lot of times when we go to groups, we have an expectation for people to be something for us. And it's like, oh, the group was bad or it was terrible or they're lame. So what you're sharing with me, that deadpan kind of thing, we can have that with family members and friends. That's awful. When you see that in a support group, just keep in mind, they're very tapped out emotionally. And so it's not a negative thing towards you. It's probably where a lot of the group members and what they're going through. So I'll go back to your email. Or they assume it's a good time to share their life story instead of sitting with me in the ashes. Understood. Where it's like you share your story and then they jump in and they want to share theirs. And in support groups, this can be, it does take some management because everybody kind of wants to be able to jump in and feel that empathy. It shows how much we're needing it. For instance, back to the email. For instance, if I'm going to be brave enough to share a hurtful experience, of course, I'm sharing to get empathy in return, which helps me feel partially healed and validated. Yeah, understood. Now, we do have to be aware that when that need for having empathy gets so intense that it's like taking over, beware and just recognize the rejection mindset. Because when that takes over, it's going to blind us because we're going to be so filled with hurt about how people are not empathizing with us. We have to recognize too, yeah, they got their own pain. They got their hurt too. They're all going through their own stuff. So I'm not sharing pain to brag or complain or get attention. And the response I'll get is, and there's a list here of responses. I don't know how, have no idea how to help. That went back to one of the points I made. Yeah, life is hard. Wow, you went through a lot. That happened to me too. Just pray and work through what happened. I hear you. Did you see a therapist? Sometimes we just need to let things go. There's the Christian cliche world. We just got to let it go. Sister, just let it go. Brother, you just got to let it go. Oh, let it go. I never thought of that. I never thought of that. You know what you need to do? You need to pray and read the word. Oh, read the Bible and pray. Oh, I thought I was supposed to read the newspaper. Oh, I was supposed to read the Bible. I'm being sarcastic. If you didn't catch that. Perhaps they didn't mean to hurt you the way that they did. Oh, okay. So immediately you're sharing the story and they take the other person's side. Yeah. Be gracious to yourself during this hard time. Now, that one I would say, that's good. That's good. I understand your list of what you're sharing, but saying, be gracious to yourself. I think that's a good thing to say. I can understand where, maybe in a moment that a little too much or a little too quick of that. But saying, you know what, be gracious to yourself it's moving, the compassion lens. Here's another one. Once you heal, it'll be so much better. Yeah, that's the one that's like, I want to turn this into a positive as quickly as I can because I'm uncomfortable with what you're saying. These responses make me angry. Angry is in all caps. I'm not being vulnerable and opening up my wounded heart to receive canned responses. I hear you. When I encounter a wounded individual, my response is to empower and help them actually heal. And what I need to hear from others is, I can't imagine how much pain that caused you. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take away the pain. You didn't do anything to deserve being treated so wrongly. Now, this is where I want to reemphasize what I said earlier. You said, what I really need is, just be aware you have a very specific expectation of how you want people to respond to your pain. Just understand they may be empathetic, but they may not say it in exactly these ways. Because for some people, the sentences you wrote out what you need, for somebody else, they'd kind of go, I don't want to hear that. I don't know that I want to hear that. But for these are words, recognize these are meaningful words of empathy that you probably didn't get growing up. And these sentences are really important for you. For someone else, the sentences may look a little different. Let's see. I lost my place. Okay, back to the email. These are sentences that you'd like people to say. I can see they hurt you very deeply, and I want you to know I'm with you in the pain. You are not alone. I'd like to know what you need and how I can be here for you right now. I love you and care about you. I'm here to support you. Now, I love you, that's a strong statement. So somebody who doesn't know you very well, and they're just turning to empathize with you, to say that kind of strong statement would be too much, even though that's understandable. So you say in your question, our Creator says we are to bear each other's burdens, feel sadness, hurt, and anger alongside another. Yeah, and I think that where we get mixed up, we are called to carry each other's burdens. We are also called each to bear his own load. In Paul's exhortation in Galatians, he talks about bearing one another's burdens, or someone's in a fall and like some kind of trespass, or, and they're in a battle. We are to bear each other's burdens, but we're not called to bear it for them, because Paul does say each one of us is to carry his own load, but we are connected, so we feel that we're not alone. I feel that in Christianity, there's a deep struggle of codependency where we don't have clarity on what's ours and what's theirs. So people often get trapped into carrying stuff that's not theirs, and then this steals their empathy ability because they're just emotionally overloaded. So I think that a lot of us are on a journey of learning, like, what does it look like to carry burdens where we're not being selfish, but we're also not being burned out by everyone around us, and to have those healthy boundaries. Why are there so few people, men and women alike, who seem to genuinely want to burden bear and be kind, caring, and compassionate? A lot of it goes back to what I shared in the top 12. It is a problem. It is something that I'm encouraging and I'm praying will happen, beginning in our homes, beginning in your marriage, in your parenting, because out of our families is where the change is going to take place, of raising families of heart-connected people that live as overcomers, that know how to be empathetic to the world around them, but know how to live that in balance. So I think there is a reality check we're all getting. Empathy is a struggle. But you can be one to make a change. So you're going to these groups and you're realizing people aren't empathizing. I think for me, that has been just a sober recognition. Okay, I'm not going to necessarily find what I need here. So I'm going to lighten the expectation. I'll appreciate what I can get. Right? Because when you take the expectation, balance it out a bit and not have it so intense, you begin to focus more on just appreciating what you can get. In that group, I don't get empathy like I would want. Maybe I'll find that over here in a one-on-one setting, or maybe in this friendship, or maybe in this relationship. But here, this is kind of an opportunity for me to focus on what you are getting so that you can benefit, because you won't get like everything you need out of just one environment, one relationship. We want to, but that's often not how life works. And so also, you realize sometimes people move on from a group, realize it wasn't a good fit, but that doesn't mean this will never work. I'm open to new things. But I find working on the rejection mindset can be very, very helpful. I encourage that resource because it is all about learning to reconnect you to the love of the Father, for you to help understand who you are, but to help cleanse the filter on how you do relationships. And I believe that can help all of us, because there are needs in our heart that can get so inflamed that no matter what people do, it doesn't help, because we're living out of a very, very inflamed area of woundedness that we need to recognize and understand. If this resource has been a blessing to your life and journey, go to markdejesus.com. You can do a one-time donation or become a regular supporter. If you want to dive into the journey of becoming more emotionally aware and letting God work on the issues of your heart, I recommend the Heart Healing Journey, to invite you to take a journey where you learn to awaken, heal, and transform your life. Because it's all about the heart, living in and through the heart. And I pray this was a blessing to your life and to those that you are helping and to those you love. So, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, this is your brother from another mother saying, I will be back. But in the meantime, I pray that this adds value to your life, to your journey, that you'd experience the love of the Father and the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out.